5 talents, and the other one 2 talents, and one. We know the story, what happened. The 5, he doubled it. The 2, he doubled it. The 1, he went and hid his talent. And, and that has haunted me my entire life, because I knew I was called into ministry. And in Romans it talks about the gifts and calling of the Lord are irrevocable. So once that calling is on your life, it remains on your life. Okay. So, the Lord just started making things come in line and happen. He gave me a heart for, I've always had a heart for indigenous peoples. But I felt he was specifically calling me to a small village called Massa-Canary in Guyana, South America. And that's what I want to really talk about is that we start off with we're going through, and of course this is a picture of First Baptist in Oilton, and these are all the members. This was the 100-year anniversary. I happened to actually be there for that, and that was a really good time. But that's, and I listed there Matthew 19 and 20, and kind of key verses about 19 and 20. We all know you go ye therefore make disciples, and that's a key verse. But the other key part of that is to teach them also to do as I commanded, is what Jesus said. And discipleship is such an important part of Christian life. It's hard to be a Christian and not be a disciple, because being a disciple is actually doing exactly what Jesus tells us to do in everyday life. It may not be preaching, it may not be out there witnessing, but it's showing your neighbor by your actions, by your attitude, who you really are and who you belong to. But for those who are called to ministry, it's teaching. It's teaching about discipleship. And I've had a burden about that for several years. The next one. Preparation. I want to read these scriptures because they're really, really important to my journey. Of course, the first one being Luke 14:25 through 33. And in preparation for this, I literally sold everything I owned. I didn't have any property. I just had a couple motorcycles, a lot of tools, a lot of hunting and fishing gear, a lot of man stuff. In a couple of storage units, I got everything together, and little by little I sold everything I had and purchased the gear that I needed, the tickets I needed, whatever I needed. I came to a point where I really had to trust the Lord. I need my glasses. Well, I'm going to start with just 26 here. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife, children, brothers, sisters, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Anyone who does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. And those are really profound words. Those have stuck with me also. What are we really willing to give up to serve the Lord? God doesn't call us all to sell everything we have and go to a foreign land. But for me, he did. And that was profound for me. And when you able to give up certain things in your life, there's a lot of trust there. And it requires a lot of faith. I'm not saying I have a lot of faith. But when you step out on faith, things happen. And that's what really happened in my life through this whole experience. It was the moment I turned loose of things and started trusting God, things really began to happen. The second verse is, Acts, that was Philippians, 3:7 through 14. But whatever was to my profit, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. What is more, I consider everything a loss compared to the surpassing greatness of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them rubbish, that I may gain Christ. And really, I don't even need to read any further. That's so important right there. I mean, that's so important. important to be able to say that nothing in this world matters more than Jesus Christ. And it's hard to say my parents don't matter as much as Jesus, my children, my grandchildren, because we love our family. You know, we love our family with everything that we have. But to be able to say that Jesus, I have more love for him than I do my family, it takes a lot. It takes a lot of courage. And I don't know that I'm actually there. And then the third one was, I've got this, I'm a little unorganized. Acts 20:24, which is profound as well. And I had it marked, but I just dumped my bookmark. And I may take a little longer than you're used to. So. However, I consider my life worth nothing to me, if only I may finish the race and complete the task the Lord Jesus has given me. The task of testifying to the gospel of God's grace. And that's what it's all about for all of us. In the end, whether we die, whether Christ comes and we're taken, in the end, what matters is that we finish the race that God set us on. That we did exactly what he told us to do, what he asked us to do, what he commanded us to do. You know, we see so much when Jesus, the Great Commission we just read, teach others to do whatever I commanded you to do. What he's telling those disciples is, don't just go out and have people saved. Go out and make them into what I made you. Sure. And it's so profound. I mean, it's great. I love it. I love God. I love his work. Now we're getting to the meat. I know everybody's waiting to see all the stuff about the trip. The journey. And up here we've got, the journey started with the picture with me. And actually I was at least 60 pounds heavier there. So I'm bragging that I lost a lot of weight. But God be the glory. That one right there. And those are my best friends, Keegan and Tony. And the day I left, I drove Tony's pickup to pick them up from the Philippines. They were coming back from the Philippines. And we had timed it where I picked them up and I left for Guyana that day. And then the next picture, this is all about the actual journey. There's a bus. Those are actually called minibuses. They're four-wheel drive Toyotas, and the guy up there on top who's packing everything, his name is Albert Johnson. And as it turns out, God directed every step of this trip. I came straight to this place to catch this bus. There happened to be a Muslim man here. I spent the night there, and the next day I had to wait for the bus. And this man kept asking me questions about, because I told him why I was there, and he says, well, what do you believe about this? What do you believe about that? What do you believe about this? And remember, this is a Muslim. Just before the bus departed, he pulled me to the side and he said, will you pray for me? And he says, do you believe in the power of prayer? I said, of course I wouldn't be here if I didn't. But he pulled me to the side and I prayed over this man and I prayed in the name of Jesus. And later on, I was able to, I didn't have any extra Bibles with me at the time, but when I got settled in, the man on top there, Albert, I gave him a Bible and some material to send back to this man. And even later, I met another minister who was previously, his name is Muhammad. He was born in Islam as well, and as a Muslim. And he was a converted. He was a pastor in an Assembly of God church. And I sent him back to water the seed I planted. And everything here, everything on this trip, it was 9 months, more than 9 months in the making, from the time God pulled me off the road until the day I came back. Everything was his direction. The bottom two pictures, that's the plane. I ended up getting a free flight. When I went to the Amerindian village, I spent a month in the Amerindian village called Masikanari, the very most remote Amerindian village in Guyana. The plane is run by RAM, which is Remote Area Medical, and they do free medical flights in and out for the indigenous people when they're injured or have any medical problem. The guy who runs it, actually, everybody remember Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom? Well, many episodes, there's a guy named Stan Brock. He's the guy that wrestled the anaconda in Guyana on there. Well, he owns and runs RAM. And I actually met him at one point while I was down there. But the current pilot that was there, he said, you know, if you're going down with medical supplies or anything to Masakanari, you should email Stan and see if you can get a ride. And I did. Sure enough, I got a free ride. And actually, the other pilot next to him, the older one in the white shirt, is actually the pilot that was there when I was there. The one next to him was there training, and this was actually the day that I left. And I don't know if you can see, but most of my gear is packed in the back of the plane. We actually had to weigh everything. Every ounce, because we barely had enough. Plus, we had taken a bunch of supplies. One of the pilots had bought a bunch of flour and rice and a lot of the things that I was taking. All that stuff we had to pack on there. So we had the old school home scales. We had those out and set everything on there, weighed everything. But we made it. It was fantastic. This is the highway. This is the highway from Georgetown, which is the capital, to Lethem, which is actually the capital of Region 9, which is where I ended up spending most of my time. And when I say highway, I mean this literally is a highway. Potholes, mud, and I got there just at the beginning of the wet season, which I was trying to get there in the dry season, but this is about a 250-mile trip, and it takes 15 hours. When you start off, you end up at a place, there's a ferry crossing that goes across the Essequibo River, and to get on that ferry, they don't open until 6 in the morning. So you leave in the evening, and you actually arrive here at the ferry crossing at about, you get there right at 6, so you can beat all the other minibuses that are going across, and you get on down. It was quite an experience. Now, mind you, this is by now that was my third day in Guyana. So this was almost as bad as riding my Enduro from California to Oklahoma. And this is the flight leaving Lethem. That's where I was at. And actually, when I got to Lethem, the bus driver, Albert, his family owns a hotel that's in Lethem. And I was telling him, well, I need to go to the Amerindian Hostel because it's like $2.50 a night to stay with a hammock, but it's not really safe or anything. And he says, you know, my family, we own the gas station and the hotel and everything right here in Lethem. So let me talk to my mom. And he talked to his mother. She says, yeah, there's a place in the back where you can hang your hammock, and it cost me $5 a night. So that was fantastic. I was really definitely on a budget. And actually, I probably missed it already. There was a shot of the Banab where I stayed when the plane was taking off, but that's all right. But I was there for 11 days. I had to get, during that 11 days, I had to get a permit to go to see the YY because they're in a protected area. And I went through all the formalities to get that done. And actually, I had to go through the person who was in charge of the church there. They had already been evangelized back in the 40s, and they actually have the entire Bible in their language, in the YY language. But Brother Charles, and I've got some pictures of him, and the Christian Brethren Church. I don't know if you're familiar with the Christian Brethren. They're very similar to the Baptists, but they oversee the church that was in the YY village. And he's the one actually that helped me. He told me everything I needed to do to be able to go to Masakanari. And my intention was, I had gone on the Joshua Project, which is very, very, usually very accurate. And there was supposed to be a village that spoke the same language as Masakanari, the YYs. And my intention was to go there, learn the language, and then go to this unreached, because they were actually categorized as one of the most unreached. And I get there and I find out this other tribe doesn't exist. So a lot of times when God tells you to do something, we assume it's for one reason, and as it turns out, it's for another reason.
Was that a Packard Club plane?
Oh yeah, I believe it was. I think it's a 69 model or something like it. It was actually pretty old, but it was actually one of the smoothest flights I've ever had. Thank the Lord. I was worried. I had never been on a plane that small, and the only one I'd been on that was similar to that was a twin engine, and that was in Georgia during springtime. So that was like a roller coaster. I just assumed all prop engine planes were like that. Thank God it wasn't. It was nice and smooth. It's in Mesa Canary, just to tell you where it's at. I've got a map on here, but it's about 100 miles, 110 miles. It's an hour, a little over an hour, 15 minutes from Lethem, where I was at. Go ahead, Brad. Oh, and this is I landed at the this is the airstrip at Mesa Canary, the Wyoming Village. And the pile of stuff you went by real quick, that was all my gear. And they didn't know I was coming, so I was sitting there. It's 3.5 kilometers from the village to the airstrip. And I'm thinking, I don't know what I'm gonna do. And within just a few minutes, I started hearing motorcycles. And sure enough, here come about 3 guys on motorcycles. Their father, Washana, ended up being a very good friend of mine. He was the deputy Tusha. The Tusha was like the village chief or the leader. They're elected officials. They're elected every 4 years. But the assistant, Washana, had sent his sons to come see why the ram plane had landed and then taken off. And they came and then they went. They had a village 4-wheeler, so they went back and got it. Came and got all the supplies and everything. And I brought them there, and I had brought lots and lots of stuff that I'd given, machetes and things like that. And I had to wait there for the actual two-show. This is an aerial view of the village itself. Up in the far right corner, the round building with the dome on it, that's called a banab. That's the meeting. That's a traditional, in most Amerindian villages in South America have this type of a traditional building. It's where the community meets, they make decisions and things, and which actually the following day, because the two-show actually didn't show up until late that night, so I didn't get to see him, but I had to go before him and the council members to see whether or not they would actually let me stay in the village. Because they're wary about a lot of people, and they usually charge $500 for anybody to stay in the village for any reason. It's usually tourists or things like that, but there's not a lot of tourists that come that far. Huh?
Did you say charge $500 for you?
Yeah, it usually costs $500 to stay in the village. But when I told them what my intentions were and that I had intended to volunteer in the clinic, they voted and they said, it was good. And within a few days, they knew my intentions were good. And of course, I had promised Brother Charles, since he didn't know who I was or anything, and he was in charge and overseeing the church, and the church there had already been, people had already been evangelized. I gave him my word that I would not evangelize, but that unless somebody asked me. So I was there specifically for the first 3 weeks. I worked specifically in the clinic. I've gone to school for EMT. I've got 3 years of nursing. I didn't finish, but I have quite a bit of medical background, so I was able to help in the clinic and actually on work days, and we'll get to that here. Go ahead to the next one. Here's the map. Goodness, I wish I had a better map. On the yellow, the one with the yellow on it, all the way down on the bottom, there's a red dot close to the bottom. That's Mesa Canary. All the way up on the ocean, on the coast, is Georgetown. Yeah, and then come on about 3/4 of the way down in the country, and then over to the left. A little bit more down, about halfway down. A little bit more. To the left, all the way to and then down to the next red dot, right there. That's Lethem. And that's the capital of Region 9, and that's where I spent most of my time after I returned from the Waimea village. Go ahead. And this is where I come to the course change. And here's a picture in the bottom with all my gear stuck on the the table, and I'm waiting to see the two-show to see if I can stay. And I've got some stuff set up here, and what I ended up going with, I packed these 2 bags here full and a backpack. And now what I took to the village was a lot more than that, but when I left the U.S., everything I owned was there. And then on the top there, that's the road from the village, or from the airstrip to the village. And I took that picture when I landed. That was there. All right. And the course change I'm saying is, the reason I thought I was going, and I explained that a while ago, and the other village didn't exist. So, but I'm here. I don't know what God has in store for me. This is a picture up in the top is the Banab again. This is a picture actually I took from the clinic. In the far right, the little bit of a white building you see there is actually the guest house. That's where I stayed. And actually, I believe this is actually taken from the church. Inside the guest house, there was a Gideon's Bible. I had to take a picture of that. That was pretty cool. But there's the yellow building's the clinic. That's why I worked for 3 weeks. And the other picture is the church. And you can see, the wooden pews. All the churches there, the wooden pews are actually handmade. All their planks and their wood are made with chainsaws. All their lumber. Of course, they can't go to the lumber stores, so they are starting to get tin roofs. The church and the clinic and several of the buildings do have tin roofs. Up here, I've got a picture of the far right corner is the kitchen. That's where I made most of my meals. The 2 young men, the YY men there with the baskets, they weave these baskets and they carry them like backpacks. And they actually carry unbelievable amounts of loads. It's unbelievable how strong these people are. Of course, they have to be. But the one at the top, this guy's probably in his 80s. And I had to get a picture of him because he was almost as strong as some of the young men. And actually, that's where I got this. And I asked the kids this morning at Sunday school if they knew what it was. And of course, I've told a few people, but can anybody guess what it is?
You can't see it here.
Ah.
It's a claw or something.
It is. It's an armadillo claw. But it's not an armadillo like we got armadillos. It's a giant armadillo. Yeah. But the old man, he saw a fishing rig that I had that he wanted, and he brought that back to trade. So I thought, well, that'll work. So.
How big was that armadillo?
I imagine it was probably at least that big. It was huge. The giant armadillos, they're really big animals. And then here's a picture with a bunch of the kids outside. They would gather outside the clinic a lot of times to see the big fat white bearded kilted guy. But a lot of people laugh, man. A lot of people give me a hard time for wearing a kilt, but it's opened a lot of doors for me. Everybody wants to know why you wear a kilt, and it's always an opportunity for me to share Jesus Christ. Always, because there's always somebody, and there's a lot of people. A tattooed bearded guy in a kilt can talk to that somebody in a suit and a tie can't. All right. This is Madifa. He is one of the council members, and he's one of the elders of the church. And he had a virtual zoo at his house. And he's actually building, right there, he's making my bow that I unfortunately had to leave in Guyana. It was a very nice bow. I was very proud of that bow. But that's a parrot at his house. There's a sloth up there that he had at his house, and a little monkey. He had powies, which is similar to it tastes just like a turkey, but it's about in between the size of a chicken and a turkey. He had a bunch of those. He had a bunch of parrots, and he had the only cats in town, kittens, real cats. They do have the big cats there, but not as pets. All right. And here, actually, the top one, the last week I was there, the guy in the middle, he came down there. He was a bush pilot, but he was also a fishing guide. And coerced me. I mean, it took a lot to get me to go fishing with him for a week. Not really. I really enjoyed it. His name is, he actually, he ended up, he's in South Africa right now. But the bow the guy is carrying that's down, that's actually the bow that the guy was making. And both those animals, one of them is called a laba in Guyana. The rest of South America, they're called paca. They're similar to an agouti or a capybara. And they taste fantastic. And the poise, the bird I was telling you about, that's what the bird is the other guy's holding. And that's Anthony. And actually, I saw him on TV the other night. There was one of the fishing shows. They were fishing for the wolffish, which is Haimara. And that's actually what the guy was there to catch. And he actually happened to be the guide for the guy who did the fishing series. So I actually saw him. I couldn't believe it. So I emailed Donnie and let him know. He says, yeah, I saw that one. So, but the fish in the middle there, that's a piranha. That's one that I caught. That was probably about 2 pounds. That's after it's been smoked. I put my hand there so you could see about how big it was. And the other 2 pictures on the other side, the top one is some piranha being roasted over an open fire while we were out fishing. And the bottom one is on our way back. So I couldn't get a free plane ride out, so I had to take the boat, which is several days, in a dugout canoe. But there's 19 monkeys, I believe, roasting there in that bottom right-hand picture. And actually, monkey's the best. Spider monkey's the best meat I've ever eaten. It's fantastic. Yeah, and actually the meat was fantastic. Of course, I'm a wild game kind of guy. You couldn't tell, but you know. All right. Change of course. I'm still on that. And this is why I believe the Lord ended up bringing me here to YY Village. While I was there, it was a rainy season, and the road became really bad between the village and the airstrip. And the airstrip is a lifeline. If there's anybody with any kind of medical emergency or anything. And they had several work days while I was there. You see those logs that are across there in the four-wheeler. We actually, I say we, I was working in the clinic, so I missed out most of the fun. So on the last work day before the two-shot, I had to go to see the government. I asked him if I could come along. Yeah, I'm a big, burly American guy, you know. You go ahead and do that other one. So this is the day I went down to help him work. And I thought at first I could try to keep up with the young guys, and that didn't work. So then I thought maybe I can keep up with the old guys. And the one who was making my bow, Madifa, I was with him, and he's probably pushing 70, and I couldn't even come close to keep up with him. I mean, these guys, they work, and they're out here. This is some of the trees they were gathering and cutting to put in the road, and we ended up having to do that for quite a distance just to be able to get to the airstrip. And what I did, when I said this was a change of course, I ended up with my camera, ended up filming the entire 3.5 kilometers of this and the condition it was in, and I said some things on this, and I sent that film with the two-shop to the government, and they actually used that film to secure funding to put in a new road. So, I mean, you never know what God has in store, how He's going to use you, whether it's humanitarian, whether it's to spread the gospel. Whenever He says to do something, don't always assume you know what it is.
Hey, Rich,
Yes.
if you're going to put in a new road, what kind of a road are you going to put in that environment?
Well, you got to build it up, is what you have to do.
Gravel in?
Well, yeah, and actually they had the entire airstrip is made of gravel, and I actually got to see the gravel pit where they pulled it out bag at a time. I mean, one pack at a time, and they packed that entire, the one that showed where the plane was taking off and my gear was there. That entire airstrip was graveled, and it was done by hand.
Wow.
They packed it in by backpacks?
Yeah, they hiked it in. I actually hiked over to where it was because just before I left, I was trying to get a flight out. There were several planes that were scheduled to come in, and they either they couldn't carry my weight, or they had too many